Welcome to the latest episode of The Independent. I'm Pete Sampson in New Orleans, joined as always by my co-host Matt Fortuna on a very special episode previewing the Sugar Bowl on Wednesday night. As you have noticed, we're on Show Us, so our viewers and listeners can join the show with us live, ask questions. Look forward to getting into all that. And a big thanks to Prize Picks, presenting sponsor for the show. For all your daily fantasy needs, check out Prize Picks. And we appreciate them sponsoring this show here on The Independent.
Great to be back, Pete. How's everything going down in New Orleans? Are you getting ready to party in Bourbon Street later tonight?
Not quite. Plenty of work to be done. There was Notre Dame Media Day, Georgia Media Day, got a little practice viewing on Monday as we record this episode. So plenty to get to, but this is going to be a fun episode. Again, Prize Picks is allowing us to use the Show Us format to bring in our listeners to now become viewers of the show and ask questions. So we're going to have a lot of fun tonight previewing Notre Dame and Georgia in the Sugar Bowl.
It's funny, Pete. I was going back through the archives to think of previous big Notre Dame playoff games and the feeling and buzz around them. And I found a story I wrote on The Athletic in 2019, basically about how impossible it was to win a national championship if you weren't Alabama or Clemson. And I quoted a Notre Dame fan named Chris Hurley in there who basically said, I go into these games. He was a student when they won it in '88. And he said, nowadays I go into these games thinking, let's just not get blown out. And he's like, I see Julian Love go down against Clemson. I think, okay, like we have no depth, we're done. And like that feeling, I think, is just so far a distant past for Notre Dame fans right now. When you look at this game, that doesn't mean they're going to win, doesn't mean they're going to blow them out. But you see the Vegas spread, you see the vibes around both programs. I wouldn't be shocked either way, unless it was a blowout. I don't think it'll be a blowout either way. But I absolutely think Notre Dame goes into this thinking they can and maybe should win this game, which is just night and day from, I think, where the fan base and program is used to being in a situation like this.
Yeah, that's my big story on The Athletic on Tuesday, because I think that the culturing and building this sense of belief inside the program has been a big part of the architecture that Marcus Freeman has put in place this year. And I think that Notre Dame talked a good game in 2020, but didn't back it up. The way that they played that game, it was sort of celebrating a backdoor cover at the end when I think Michael Mayer scored with less than a minute to go to cover a 19.5 point spread. And I think that, it's from Freeman's point of view, it's going forward on fourth down. Notre Dame has more fourth down conversions successful this year than in Freeman's first two seasons combined. It's playing aggressive man coverage in the secondary. They are, I think, they're second nationally in the amount of man-to-man defense that, the secondary plays. It's calling all those fake punts, whether it be the punt at Georgia Tech, the punt at USC, field goal at Georgia Tech, punt versus Virginia, field goal against Indiana that left Kurt Cignetti scrambling to call a timeout, and Marcus Freeman sort of almost, if you could laugh in someone's face from across the field, Marcus Freeman was laughing at Kurt Cignetti's face. That all matters. And I think that's part of the reason why Notre Dame believes it can and will win on Wednesday night. And that's just not about saying like, hey, we believe in ourselves and like go team. It's actually putting in the work. Because the roster up and down, like Georgia has the more talented roster. And so that's kind of same story as it ever was. But I just think the way Notre Dame's constructed, and Kirby Smart said it today, and I think sometimes when people say it reminds me of an SEC program, they sort of take that as like self-mythologizing about the conference. But Smart meant it. He's just like, look, they hit you in the mouth. Their linebackers play really downhill and physical. They're strong on both lines of scrimmage. I don't remember Nick Saban spinning that kind of yarn in 2020, and certainly not in 2012. So I think to me, that's all significantly different from where we were 4 years ago, and certainly where we were 12 years ago.
Completely different. And the other part too, it's just seeing is believing, and you can mock the schedule all you want. I counted these guys out when Benjamin Morrison went down. He was their best player. I thought, how are you going to ever overcome that? Well, they've had a couple young guys in the secondary who have played phenomenal so far. They've dealt with injuries on the defensive line, a lot of them already. Now, Could this be one too many? Yeah, it's very possible with Riley Mills gone. I mean, certainly my uh, perception of this game took a hit, for Notre Dame going into it, knowing that Riley Mills would be out for the season. But they've overcome similarly large injuries so far this season. And the other part of it too is Georgia's starting a first-time quarterback, and
Yeah.
maybe that gives them a spark the way it did in the second half against Texas. You're reading a lot of those like feel good, we're behind this guy narrative
Do you know
stories,
he
which
drives an old truck?
I heard about that. Um, but we'll see. I mean, Carson Beck was a bit of a turnover machine this season. A little surprised he declared for the draft. I mean, when you see what quarterbacks are commanding on the open market right now, you'd think a guy at least as accomplished as him would get paid more going to another school next year. But that's neither here nor there. That adds to an element of unknown certainly going into this. And the other part, we all saw the ticket prices for the first round when they were on campus and how outrageously expensive they were for Notre Dame, Indiana. I was surprised to see these ones were not that crazy relative to some of the other games going on this week. And I asked the ticket guy down in New Orleans, and his theory was Georgia fans are giving up because their quarterback's out, and Notre Dame fans are saving their money for the Orange Bowl. And I thought, okay, that sounds a little bold, little bold, and a little defeatist by both fan bases, if you ask me, because I think this is a 50-50 game at best. But it definitely contributes to that feeling of things starting to turn, at least perception wise, in Notre Dame's favor entering this one.
I was looking into Georgia. Can you tell me the last non-SEC team to beat Georgia?
Uh,
Because they're actually now in the SEC.
I would say Texas, but they're in the
Yeah.
SEC now. That was when
Yeah,
Bevo
Texas.
attacked Zach
Yep,
Emerson.
I'll go. Yeah, and that the year before they lost to Georgia Tech, which was Kirby Smart's first season, I believe. That's the last time a non-SEC team current has beaten Georgia. So it's like Georgia is entitled to feel as confident as I want to. But I talked to Malachi Starks. I talked to Tate Ratledge today. A couple other Georgia starters, and like I'm sort of buying what they're selling about like Notre Dame. Notre Dame is good. Like I don't, and I never bought that from Alabama in 2012 or 2020. I don't know if I bought that from Ohio State in 2015. So it just feels so much more even to me than it ever has before in this kind of setting. And I don't know if you saw there's like Ryan Russillo had Booger McFarland on, and it was kind of Booger McFarland's take was like, if not now, when, if you're Notre Dame. And like I kind of buy that. Like I just don't. I'm with you that I thought the 14 playoff would make it harder for Notre Dame to win a national championship, not easier. And yet here we are. They won their first round game against Indiana at home. Now they're playing a backup quarterback. They could play Penn State, which can't win a big game to save its life. And then you get like maybe Ohio State, which has flaws, maybe Oregon, which has flaws. There's just a lot. There's a lot there, and yet Notre Dame has never beaten Georgia, so it's kind of hard to get ahead of herself on much. Although Marcus Freeman was asked today about the 31-year Major Bowl losing streak, and he was essentially like, "What is a Major Bowl these days?" And like, I don't.
Is Indiana not a bowl game? I guess it's not technically.
It's not. I don't blame him from taking that point of view because it does kind of feel that way. Like, what is anything anymore in college football? But I do think if backup quarterback or no, if Notre Dame wins on Wednesday night, it's their biggest win. Certainly, it's their most consequential postseason win since they beat Texas A&M in the Cotton Bowl after the '93 season. And I think it would stack up quite favorably with Clemson, the two Clemson wins, Oklahoma in 2012, probably beyond that, just based on the brand name of Georgia and where they are. It's a little bit more like Clemson. Maybe this would be remembered similarly to the DJU game in 2020 when Trevor Lawrence was out. I don't remember anyone at Notre Dame apologizing for that after the fact, nor should they. And I think the same would hold true Wednesday night into Thursday morning if they beat Georgia with Gunnar Stockton.
Oh, but this would have more staying power. It's not like you're going to get with Carson Beck in 2 weeks. You get a Penn State team that you're already a 1.5 point favorite against, last I saw. So I think I wouldn't go so far as say if not now, when, because it's not like our game's never going to be good again. But the cards align very, very well for them in this particular season with this particular bracket and this particular Georgia team. And I think that's where there's really a chance to seize an opportunity here to paint a path at least toward getting to the national championship game. And, I think whoever comes out of that side of the bracket is going to be favored over whoever comes out of this side of the bracket. I just think
Yeah.
between Texas, Ohio State, and Oregon, especially when you consider the fact that, one of those teams will have beaten probably two of them. They're going to be the more battle tested team going into that. But it's definitely a very nice opportunity for Notre Dame in that regard. We still had on our friend Bruce Feldman this week as well, and Bruce quoted someone from the Georgia staff saying that he thinks they're going to kill Notre Dame. So I do think you can find tea leaves wherever you want on both sides of this. As far as who's going to win this game, again, I don't think anyone's going to kill anyone. I think it's going to be. I think they're very, as much as we talk going into the end of game about how similar those two teams were, at least for how they like to play. I think Georgia and Notre Dame are similar too. This is a Georgia team that has really lacked downfield passing threats throughout the course of the season. The run game, when healthy, has been strong. And I do think with a healthy Trevor Etienne and that big offensive line that seems to finally be healthy, they've got a chance to maybe wear down that Notre Dame defensive line in a way that they haven't been tested so far this season. But again, it's going to come down to, you know, will the new quarterback get rattled or not? Will he make big plays or not? I don't know. I think what we've seen from him is such a small snapshot that it's hard to say because he did this in 30 minutes against Texas, he'll do this or that against Notre Dame.
Yeah, he may think twice about putting his shoulder down at the goal line, or not putting his shoulder down at the goal line. I mean, that
Getting Rashad as his backup. Maybe he comes in
yeah,
and
right.
earns $13 million.
I mean, and the pick that he threw against Texas sort of stays with me in some ways because it was arguably the worst interception I thought Riley Leonard's pick against Northern Illinois was bad. This was significantly worse. So that sticks with me. Al Golden against a backup deep quarterback, done that many times this year already. Come out on top every time. I do think that Gunnar Stockton will have a difficult time throwing against Notre Dame, but I'm with you. I think that this is probably the first time all year where if it was a close game in the fourth quarter, I would feel better about Georgia grinding out Notre Dame than Notre Dame grinding out Georgia, which is like that's how Notre Dame beat Texas A&M. And I just wonder without Riley Mills, can you sort of hold up at the point of attack if Georgia's in a position where they can try to grind you out? Like maybe Notre Dame steals a possession with a fake punt or fake field goal. Maybe they're the team that gets the big turnover, where you're up 10 after 3 quarters. If that happens, then, the ability to lean on ETN and the run game goes way down. And I feel like Georgia has a chance to sort of like pull a Notre Dame on Notre Dame, but they have to get in a position where that makes strategic sense. And like, if Notre Dame really calls it to win it, doesn't play timid, goes for it, shows all the confidence that the program has been talking about all week, frankly, all season post Northern Illinois, then, maybe Georgia doesn't get in a position to play that way.
I do think Georgia's advantage is since that they've been in those types of games before, and Notre Dame really hasn't outside of week one. The other part of it, like I just cannot get a read. We know how talented the players are on that Georgia defense, but it's really come and gone all season. I mean, they gave up to Georgia Tech, who Notre Dame destroyed. Granted, without Haynes King, but let's. I don't want to say Haynes King is a poor man's Riley Leonard, but I think he's a worse version of Riley Leonard as far as the way he plays. They ran for 260 yards against Georgia. But a week later, that Texas offense, that run game, which looked unstoppable against Clemson, 31 yards. And they had only 29 against Georgia when they lost them the first time. Like when these guys decide to turn it on, and for whatever reason they didn't every week, they're really damn good. And if they can do that against Notre Dame's offensive line and at least you're never going to neutralize Jeremiah Love, but contain him a little bit and contain Riley Leonard a little bit and force him to throw more than they want to, I think that part of it is going to be tough for Notre Dame to overcome. But again, I just don't know, what's the secret sauce for Georgia where they play that way against Texas, but not necessarily against everybody else. I'm not sure. I will say, for whatever reason, Kirby Smart has been at his best this year when this team has kind of been overlooked, particularly that first Texas game. We all, at least me, I thought Texas was going to run them out of the building, and Georgia just sucked the life out of that place. They had us questioning whether Quinn Ewers deserved to keep his starting job by the end of that. So, the talent is there on defense. It's been lacking on offense, and the just complete wild card that is Gunnar Stockton, I think, makes this very, very interesting.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get to questions. If you've joined us here on the show, you can hit participate, and our producer will bring you to the stage. And it looks like we've got our first guest. And before we get to our first question, just a reminder, we're brought to you and by many things, including Roback. You can go to roback.com, use the promo code Irish for 20% off your first order.
And we also have a deal with Obvious Shirts where you can get great merchandise like this sweatshirt I'm wearing right now and a number of game themed t-shirts that are available right now on obviousshirts.com. Catholics versus Canines, Indiana State champs. Those are now available after the Indiana State championship. Hoodies were available going into the Indiana game. Lots of great stuff from our friends at Obvious Shirts. Please support the podcast by shopping there, and appreciate all the support we've gotten so far.
And our newest sponsor, Future Fans. If you're looking to create memories with your kids over football and teach them the games, Future Fans has activity boxes to help your kids learn how to be better fans. For Notre Dame's next run through the college football playoff, they'll be watching along with you. You can use the activity boxes to learn about all the rules of the game, downs, and figure out how to sort of better understand the sport of football. It's $49.99 at futurefans.com, and you can get 15% off your order with the promo code Irish. Again, Future Fans activity boxes for kids to learn how to love football just like you. Go to futurefans.com. Activity box is $49.99, and you can get 15% off your first order with the promo code Irish. All right. Hopefully we can get to some questions here. Okay. Well, as far as we sort of queue up our questions here from our listeners, I will say, like, being at Media Day today, that the size element of from an SEC school, it definitely still pops up. It still tracks, not at the level, and I probably joked about this on previous podcasts about going down to the Sugar Bowl in LSU 2006 and be like, oh my God. Poor
2012 DJ
Alabama.
Fluker, largest
Yeah.
human being I've ever seen in my life.
Yes. That Georgia is quite large. However, the size disparity between Notre Dame and this SEC school is not quite where it was in 2012, and certainly not in 2006, which remains the holy cow, your quarterback is bigger than our defensive end in the case of Jamarcus Russell. So fear not when the game starts. Well, Notre Dame will be, and this is, I still, like, to me, Riley Mills was kind of one of those guys that was like, Georgia would have been like, whoa, okay, that's a big looking dude. Joe Alt, Gerby Lambert doesn't play, but I think he's kind of one of those like, oh man, this is a big looking dude. All right, we've got our first question from Giuliano on the Independent. Giuliano, if you can hear us, go ahead with your question.
Yes, sir. I am a longtime listener. You guys are awesome. I appreciate you guys. And my question is, can Notre Dame finally get the job done? I believe they can, but what's it going to take to finally just get over this hump of the big game? Can we win the big game?
Yeah, I think they absolutely can. And I would echo something Pete wrote in his mailbag today, which was, you need to make a winning play or have your coach make a winning move in a game like this in order to pull up what, whether Vegas says it or not, would be a pretty sizable upset as far as the significance of this win for this program, whether that's being aggressive on fourth down, calling a fake punt or field goal at the right time, noticing something in Georgia's scheme that you can take advantage of. You're not going to win this game playing conservative. You're not going to win this game playing scared. You're going to win it by trusting the personnel you have on the field. And I think one of the best things Notre Dame has going for them in that regard is I believe they lead the nation in turnover margin going into this season. And we could talk all we want about Al Golden's defense and how aggressive they've been. To me, the thing that gives me a lot of faith in this offense, despite the lack of a downfield passing game, Riley Leonard's thrown just 4 picks since that NIU game.
Right.
He's been very, very sharp offensively. Even one of those 4 picks was last week against Indiana, which was a bit of a broken play that ended up meaning nothing. It was early in the game. So I definitely think the ingredients are there for them to do this.
Right. I agree. I do agree with that. And I heard Marcus Freeman say today, he goes, it's violence again, which is great. That's got to be on the next shirt. Can't wait for that shirt.
Yeah, you're going to hear his shirts on a case.
Oh, yeah. Domers on domes equals violence.
Yeah, I also talked to Pat Coogan about like, should we get on some 4 quarters of what football? I know that's a big seller as well, but
Oh, yeah.
violence has to be our next one. Who knows? I mean, maybe we'll get a shirt creation coming out of Wednesday night.
Oh, yeah. This will be the biggest win in my lifetime. I've seen nothing but Notre Dame horrors. So I'm believing that this is the time. I support Coach Freeman. I think he's done great. The team's turned around. So you guys do a great job. I love all the content. I listen every week. You guys are awesome.
Thanks, Julian.
Thanks,
I
Leon.
appreciate you being on the show.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's funny looking back over. I haven't Notre Dame's major bowl loss streak. They're 0-10. I haven't covered all 10 of those, but the average margin of defeat I want to say is like 18 points. They haven't had many close ones. I think they've had more 28-point more losses than they've had single digit losses.
Yeah,
and it's
that OK State game looked like it was going to be 28 points the other way in the first half.
And even like, I don't want to downplay, like that would have been significant if Marcus Freeman had won a major bowl game in his first game. But I think we would agree that Georgia and Oklahoma State are not exactly the same caliber of resume builder in terms of opponents.
Yeah, I think we can all agree on that. Indiana's got to count as a bowl game, no? It's a postseason game. Like,
no, it's a postseason game only, not a bowl game.
Okay.
Can't play a bowl game in your home stadium.
You should be able to.
Yeah. Well, if we've got more questions, hopefully coming through the queue here. Again, you can hit participate if you're with us on the Show Us app, and our producer will bring you to the stage. You can ask your question. Hopefully, we had some webcams as well along the way. But I guess in terms of something that was interesting to me from today was like, Mitch Jeter. I didn't get a chance to talk to him, but reading sort of through his transcript, is like that's kind of a sneaky reborn advantage for Notre Dame. If what Jeter did against Indiana and going back to what he did as A&M will travel here to New Orleans, because it's like they had no confidence in the kicking game for a solid 2.5 months, and now it feels like they're back.
Yeah, I mean, they took a step in the right direction. I mean, the one that got blocked was still comically low. And again, I don't say that as a kicking expert, but you could see that from the untrained eye on TV. It looked ready to get blocked, and it was blocked. And, I wouldn't go so far as to think, well, he hit 2 and then that happened, so his confidence is back to crap again. No, I don't think that's the case. I do think being indoors certainly helps as well for a game like this, but I think some nerves were calmed by what happened in Indiana, particularly the long one at the end of the first half. You got almost a Bronx cheer out of that crowd because they've been waiting to see something positive for the kicking game in that regard. And so I think that was definitely a step in the right direction. I wouldn't go so far as to say it's all the way back and they're fully confident in it. I mean, if they're down 1 or 2 driving late, how close do they got to get for you to be like, all right, they should win this? Like, I just
should. It's like if they attempted a game-winning kick with Mitch Jeter, I would feel a hell of a lot more confident today than I would have before the Indiana game.
Sure, absolutely. But I mean, how close? If it's from 40, how confident are you?
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we might have a question coming up in the queue from Jackson. Hopefully a long-time listener here, but we get him unmuted and ask his question here. There we go. It's okay. Yeah, and we'll get to Jackson here in a couple seconds. Definitely an Irish fan I'm going to go based on the Boston Celtics and it background alone. Jackson, you're with us on the Independent. How you doing? Thanks for joining the show.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Great.
Well, my Irish story, just indulge me for a second. My grandpa was a 1966 champion Gerald Wisney, and then two brothers, a little bit late '90s, early 2000s, Jerry and Andy Wisney.
All right.
And I was born in South Bend, so I have been raised every Saturday watching Notre Dame football, and it's horrors. I remember
It's they're gonna cry. It's beautiful, but yeah, horrors works too.
This is why this app was
The next
invented, so we
t-shirt.
could see the tears.
it's so like one of my earliest memories was one of my earliest Irish memories that like I remember being absolutely distraught for was the infamous Bush push. But I guess my basic question is just like what do you guys think this what how can we move this, kind of echoing Giuliano, how do we win the big one here? I don't want 2012 to happen again. I don't want that to happen again.
How much money do you have on this game? You seem very distraught.
Yeah.
No, so I bought the CFP RSVP for the national championship game.
Okay.
So I'm gonna bring my grandpa to that if he gets to make it there. So
You'll be in Atlanta.
So
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Are you in Boston?
no, actually, I'm from there, but like I grew up there. But I'm in Tallahassee right now. So
Okay.
it's a 4-hour drive up to Atlanta if that does happen. So
Fantastic. Well, I mean, to answer your question about like winning the big one, is like we kind of answered that. Like some of it is confidence and play calling and having a coach that's willing to go for it. I mean, I felt like, I mean, maybe you agree with this, Jackson, but like I felt watching the Indiana game that I was watching a replay of the Alabama game for 2020, but Indiana was Notre Dame and Notre Dame was Alabama. And that, I think that Freeman's like, I'm going for it mentality has like, that it makes me more confident that eventually they're going to knock down this door opposed to just doing what Brian Kelly had been doing. And like, to full credit, like he won a lot of games. And that's, he put the program in a position where elevating a first-time head coach made sense by sort of rebuilding some of the foundations. But I think that, Notre Dame, and Matt and I have talked about this on previous shows, like this is as all in as either of us have seen the administration on football since we've been on this beat. And so it feels like there's another level to get to with the Notre Dame football program in a way that like I haven't necessarily felt much of the last 24 years, like the whole shopping down a different aisle or like we can't do this or we can't do that. It does feel like Marcus Freeman in combination with Pete Bavacqua and, the board of trustees are significant in this too, are like, no, we're going to go for it. And that I'm more confident that like Notre Dame will eventually get there than I was a year ago. Even though the head coach is the same, I think everything around him has changed at Notre Dame, or much of what's around him has changed at Notre Dame. And to me, that's really significant. Like Notre Dame shouldn't have to wait another 4 years for another chance at this, regardless of what happens on Wednesday night. And that, if I was a Notre Dame fan, that would give me confidence about like where this is going. As long as what we see on Wednesday doesn't look like what we saw in Hard Rock Stadium back in 2012.
just sorry. Just I think one of the things that gives me optimism going into this game, like versus what I expected, like the previous two CFP appearances, is just the football culture. Honestly, like just the little media you see on Peacock or whatever, like there's way more behind the scenes, as any guy that played football knows, but it's and you guys at covering the beat, like there's way more. There's it seems to me like he has a real connection with his players, and that is it's there's energy, and I didn't feel that a lot of the time with Brian Kelly. So hopefully that is sufficient for my question.
I think that's an accurate assessment of the situation. I think the confidence and the aggressiveness that they've played with all year gives me faith in a game like this. Like if they face a 4th and 2 in a critical situation, it's not, gee, what are they going to do now? Are they going to step up to the moment? No, they've been doing this all year. They were calling fake punts against Georgia Tech. Like I just think it's not going to be anything that's out of character should they find themselves in a situation like that. And then from a program standpoint, I echo everything Pete said. I'd also add, like, it's a flatter college football world right now. I mean, yes, the rich are still getting rich, but it's so hard to hoard talent these days the way you could 5 years ago if you were at Georgia and Ohio State and Alabama. That I think there are going to be many opportunities for programs like Notre Dame that are stable from an administrative and coaching standpoint, and at the very least are still going to have quality football teams and kids on those teams year after year. So I definitely think there's another level for this place to get to, and I think they're doing everything they can to reach it.
All right. Thanks, Jackson. Appreciate you coming on the show.
Jackson,
Thank you.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, I do think that as we wait for our next question, again, if you hit participate, you can hop in the queue and our producer will bring you to the stage. But I do think that it's like if I was a Notre Dame fan, I would feel more confident about where this is going, opposed to just like, oh man, that was terrible, and we might not get back here again. Like early days of Marcus Freeman, I'm not really sure if that confidence had been earned, but I do think like how he's come through this season, how they've attacked the transfer portal, how they've managed the roster, and like to Jackson's point, I think the give and take with the roster is real significant. So that adds up over time. And I think that's something that would give me more confidence about, where this is all going with Marcus Freeman, which is, hey, isn't that part of the reason why he signed a new 6-year contract last month or earlier this month?
no, exactly. Even the transfer portal moves they made have been very methodical. Not a whole lot of hoopla around them leading up to them, but they got the guys they needed. Malachi Fields, the minute I tweeted that was coming, someone from that Virginia staff texted me immediately. Great player, even better person. Happy for him. He's a Charlottesville kid. He needs to spread his wings. He'll thrive in Notre Dame. Will Pauling covered a couple of his games this year. Felt like he was the only guy in that offense at times because they called his name every single time. I think was in a real offense, like he's got a chance to do a lot of big things next year.
Yeah, I'm with you. Well, we're waiting on our next question. I believe it's going to be coming from Sean O'Malley as our producer brings him to the stage. Yeah, and I'm with you. And, hey, Devonta Smith, not the Devonta Smith we talked about earlier in the show, but like if you're plucking a nickelback from Alabama, so that's not a bad place to look for talent. And I think like they've done a good job of that. I think that they're well capitalized to kind of keep that push. And that's. Marcus Freeman has talked about not majoring in the transfer portal, but I mean, he will be a minor with honors. I don't know how he wants to describe that. Actually, it looks like our next question might be coming from Dan Kelly 120, but yeah, they do it. I think they've done a good job of kind of figuring out. All right, hey, this is how this is who we want to attack. This is how we're going to get them. They're very. Like methodical, almost I feel like undersells it. I think it's been more surgical.
Surgical, but like not. High school recruiting is different, but how much time and hoopla did they waste publicly with Deuce Knight when I think all of us knew he probably was never coming?
That less so. Yeah, and it's like as a note, just like as a roster note aside, down here watching practice, you got Blake Hebert, Men Farimo, Jadon Blair all practicing with the team, similar to CJ Carr. I see video of our next question coming in from longtime listener of the show, Dan Kelly, I believe. So awaiting what pearls of wisdom he has for us. But yeah, that's it's all right, Dan. I think you are live on the Independent. Good to see you. Thanks for joining.
Good to see you both. Pearls of wisdom, Pete. How's this one? So I don't know if you remember from our conversation years ago. My undergraduate degree is from the University of Kentucky, which was when Jared Lorenzen was the quarterback. So you talk about a quarterback being bigger than the defensive line. That guy, you hit that mark. every single time. He was something else to watch.
Yeah.
Thanks for doing this. This is fun. So I tried to sneak this in the mailbag this week, but there's a lot of bigger picture questions. Last week, or leading up to the Indiana game, all the focus was those linebackers can't hang with Mitchell Evans. It's time for Mitchell Evans to be the dude again. We keep waiting on him to be that guy from pre-injury 2023. If he is that guy on Wednesday night, do the Irish run away with this? I mean, I'm all with all the other listeners who have said, can we do this? I think if he steps up the way he's done before, they have a great shot.
I mean, that's a good point. I do think that I thought Mitchell Evans was going to eat Indiana alive and really was lightly involved. Had a fumble that I think recovered early on. I'm less. I think the Mitchell Evans that we see on Wednesday night doesn't need to have a lot more than 3 catches for 22 yards if all 3 went for first downs, and then is a huge part of the run game. So that's the Mitchell Evans that I'd really like to see on Wednesday. I think that maybe we're not going to get back to the Mitchell Evans against Duke and Ohio State, but I'm not sure if we got Jordan Faison, if he's really a postseason specialist. Maybe they can get away with attacking Georgia in a different way.
Yeah, nice to ask about another Kentucky native. As a Giants fan, I always have a soft spot for Jared Lorenzen myself. But
rest in peace, J-Lo.
Yeah, I know. I'm with Pete. I thought him. Tim Murray was on our show leading up to that, and his best bet I think was Evans' over yards in that game, which I thought was a lock. And I think he was a drop pass away from getting it, but I still was a little underwhelmed as far as what he ended up doing in that game. Will we get the Mitchell Evans we saw against Louisville last year, against Ohio State last year, Duke? I'm more skeptical by the day, but if he can make 1 or 2 of those big catches in traffic and just force Georgia's defense to pay more attention to him, I think that will go leaps and bounds to keeping this offense moving downfield, especially, as Pete said, when Jordan Faison looks like he's fully healthy and looks like, at least for Notre Dame's offense sake, a true number 1 threat who can go up there and make plays in the postseason. That would be a tremendous difference maker. But, they need Mitchell Evans to be Mitchell Evans, no question about it.
For sure. I'll also add a quick anecdote. I went up to South Bend this weekend with my family to go to the women's game yesterday, which they just annihilated. What a basketball team that women's team is. But anyway, happened to run into Riley Leonard on campus. It could not have been nicer to my kids. I mean, I'm sure you guys are not surprised by this. Could not have been. Took a picture with them, asked us where we were from. So as if you needed any more reason to root for the kid. He was just so delightful and nice to our family. And so I'm all for him. Always was, but I mean, what a great guy.
Yeah, he is the genuine article. Thanks for coming on with that, Dan. Appreciate you, and thanks for keeping up with listening to the show. We appreciate you for that too. Matt, if you're looking at a difference maker in this game, and it's not outside of Faison and Evans, I mean, obviously it's Love, but who else is intriguing to you in this game? For me, it's I feel like this could be a Jadarian Price A&M type of game where it's 2 yards, 1 yards, minus 2 yards, 2 yards, 0 yards, 57 yards. And that might be something that makes the difference for Notre Dame.
If we're talking off, I would actually go Aeneas Williams just because I thought they used him a lot more than I thought they would in that Indiana game, much more than just a third down back. I know this is kind of a gimme, but whether it's Bo Collins, Jaden Greathouse, Jaden Tom, anyone in that receiving core,
right?
Right. It doesn't. Just someone, right? Collins has played in big games before, and he made big plays in their biggest game of the season, to his credit, against Texas A&M. But who can do what Jordan Faison did last week? Because we haven't seen that yet. This whole season.
Yeah, it does feel like. I think Faison is fast enough to run away from Georgia's defenders, and it's been interesting. I talked a little bit to Greg McElroy and Cole Kublik today. They're at media day, and they're I almost feel like people who have seen Georgia up close are more optimistic about Notre Dame's chances than people who have seen less of Georgia and are just sort of going on the brand, if that makes sense. It's Georgia's been. I think we will see a lot of pre-snap movement from Mike Denbrock. I think they're going to try to move Georgia around to get the misfit runs, and then just hope that when they do misfit it, Jadarian Price is out the other side for 50 yards. Jeremiah Love is out the other side for 60 yards, 30 yards. I think it's going to be a chunk play run game for Notre Dame if they come out on the right side of this.
I'd agree. Sean O'Malley, ready to
I
ask?
think he's coming in the
Oh,
queue
okay.
here.
Got it. Yeah.
Yeah, if you've got a question, again, you can hit that participate button. Our producer will get you in the queue and bring you to the stage, and you can ask your question here on the Independent Live as we're waiting on Sean O'Malley here. But, yeah, I guess defensively.
I was just saying, I would add, I wonder how much, like Cole Kubler, Craig McElroy, those are SEC guys.
Yeah.
How much of their, how much are they down on Georgia compared to Georgia teams they've seen the last couple of years?
Yeah,
That is that the bar there.
Georgia had an off-brand year and won the SEC.
Right.
They lost 2 road games, right? I mean, they lost at Alabama in a epic game that would have aged better if Alabama didn't just tank it. And they lost to Ole Miss, where it just felt like they ran into a buzzsaw. Like Ole Miss was like an off-brand Georgia. Like they could put it all together against anybody at any moment, and then they could lose to Kentucky. So it is. I don't know. That's a hard read, but it's been interesting talking to McElroy a little bit and hearing him say, like, I think he was like, it's almost like he likes the matchup for Notre Dame more than he would think that he would. I don't know. It's strange. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he'll be on the call with Sean McDonough on Wednesday night. I'm a big fan of the McDonough McElroy pairing, so it should be a good call. As we're closing in on our next question here, it will be. All right, Dave Mott, you are coming here live on the Independent. Dave, thanks for joining the show.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me, guys. I'm the Gold Helmets on Twitter. I think I like every single one of Pete's posts except the supplements.
Okay.
Me too.
So no, appreciate all the content, guys. I'm live from the Play Like a Champ Lounge, aka my basement. So if you guys are ever,
Looks like you have a nice whiskey.
I was gonna say, you got a lot of nice drinks back there, a couple games going on.
Yeah, if you guys are ever in Westfield, Indiana, hit me up. We'll have a beer. So, this game, I've kind of been all over the place with this since the Indiana game. Like I was really had my doubts after the Mills injury, and then then I started getting a little more optimistic, and then I watched the second half of the SEC championship game and had some more doubt crept in. But I think where I've landed on this is, Georgia's rush offense, I believe, is in the 80s in the nation, 70s in the nation. And with an inexperienced passer, I'm feeling, I mean, they're going to get their plays, but I'm feeling a little better about that. Where I've, so that flips me to the offensive side. Like, first of all, do you think Notre Dame's offensive line is going to be able to play 4 quarters of forget you football? And, do you think Riley Mills is going to have to, hit some plays downfield? Because we hear every week, right? Oh, we're going to crowd the line of scrimmage and play, man your receivers up. Well, how'd that work out for, the schedule? But this is Georgia. So, do you think Riley Mills is going to have to stretch that defense out a little bit? Nice ball to phase on in the IU game. But, do you think you have to see more of that? And more importantly, do you think the offensive line can stand up to Georgia's front?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, for Riley Leonard, I do think there's gonna have to be some threat of it, and it's almost like it would be better if they completed it than if they didn't. But they at least have to try it. And I think that Matt and I have both covered Notre Dame games in big spots where they didn't take a shot. They never went for it. And one of the exceptions was Clemson in 2020, that shot to Avery Davis at the end. When they had to have it, they got it. But that was kind of a rarity. So I do think that Riley Leonard will at least have to take a few shots. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't concerned about the offensive line right now. And that's, I think that the offensive line should step to the forefront here. We've seen enough big Notre Dame games where maybe they've struggled or got pushed back. The defensive line, that's where I think you have to help out your defense with maybe pace of play on offense. Like, I don't think that they can go below Heinisch, Rubio, and Cross at defensive tackle. Like, I think anytime you go below those guys, you're sort of stealing snaps. And Georgia's going to know it. I'm not saying it's going to look like the Clemson game from 2018 when Julian Love goes out and Dante Vaughn comes in and it just all collapses. But I don't think you can hold up long term that way. That Matt, I don't know if you have a different opinion on that. That's just sort of how I see those two lines and the necessity of taking deep shots.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have more. Well, I know I have more confidence in Notre Dame's offensive line, the defense line going into this game for the reasons you just mentioned. I just think they're stretched probably as soon as they can possibly go on the defensive line, and that Georgia offensive line, for as inconsistent as that running game has been, seems to be as healthy of a place as it's been all season long. And they're very, very big. And again, Trevor Etienne, when he's on, he's on. I know he's been inconsistent as far as availability goes, but I could see Georgia really leaning into that run game more than ever before, given the quarterback situation. And then offensively, I think they're going to have to take some downfield shots. I think they're going to have to convert some. I don't think you can win a game of this magnitude without something like that. I don't think, the closest opponent they played to this obviously is A&M, and they had kind of the perfect game plan to outlast them in the fourth quarter there. I don't think that philosophy is going to beat Georgia on a stage of this magnitude. I just think you're going to have to do more than just simply grind them out and outlast them in the end. I mean, Georgia's the deeper team. They're the more talented team. They've been in this position before. You maybe you have the better defense. I think even that might be a stretch, at least from a talent standpoint. I think that's a stretch. So I just think you're going to have to do something extraordinary or beyond the ordinary on offense in order to do that. And obviously that would require doing stuff in the pass game.
Yeah, like, look, Notre Dame is 130th nationally in pass plays of 30 yards or more with 9. They're 124th in pass plays of 40 yards or more with 4. So, like, hitting that would be very much out of character for Notre Dame all year. So that's where I feel like Notre Dame is going to have to do something maybe a little bit different than what they've done all year. And it's not like they need to hit like 5 of them. They might just need to hit 2. And that, to me, I still feel like that's reasonable, especially with phase.
We lost you at the end there with your volume, but I would just add to that. I think you need to make Georgia try to play on their toes a little bit, especially with Georgia being potentially vulnerable offensively with a new quarterback in there. I just don't think you can let them get too comfortable, both from an offensive standpoint and from just a game standpoint of playing with the lead or not playing from behind. I think you need to use your offense to put pressure on Georgia's offense to try to do something that they haven't had to do yet with Gunnar Stockton at quarterback.
Yeah, guys. So here's to the Mitch Evans breakout game, and let's get a deep shot for Faison as well for good measure. So appreciate you guys. Keep up the good work.
Thanks, Dave.
All right, we're bringing in our next questioner as bringing Ryan Flynn to the stage. It was, yes, Natalie attired there in a.
Can you guys hear?
Yes.
Yep.
All right.
This is actually Shamrock Series last year with Navy. Bought this right after the game, thinking Sam Hartman was our Heisman quarterback that year as well.
Hopefully you didn't hear that from this podcast.
I drank a little Kool-Aid probably from you guys, but I was with it as well. Thanks for doing this. This is pretty cool. I guess my question, and I was kind of looking this up as you guys were talking earlier. 2019 against Georgia, 46 rushing yards. Watching them play against Texas both games, it's tough for me to convince myself that Notre Dame's going to be able to, I guess, control the tempo in the run game. I think Riley Leonard helps with that, but I'm a little concerned about, getting in these second and longs, third and longs where you're going to need to count on Riley Leonard to make a big throw. I can't think of a game this year where they've really had to bank on him kind of manning this offense and being the reason we win a game. I guess kind of talk me off the ledge with that one and give me a breakout receiver that you think could show up in a big moment, kind of like we saw with Faison last week.
Yeah, I mean, I would double down on Faison because one thing that one of the great play calls of the season to me was that throwback screen to Jeremiah Love against Louisville in the fourth quarter when they needed, like, the offense was not working, and they needed something out of the ordinary, and like Love provided it, and it wasn't like it was an athletic throw. Like I think sometimes we think screens are just easy to dump off, and like that was if there's such a thing as a big time screen throw, that was it. They haven't really been super effective with that since, but to me, if Georgia's bringing pressure, that would be the one thing that would stick out to me. So if the breakout receiver isn't Jordan Faison, which we kind of know what he can do, maybe it's Jeremiah Love, maybe it's Jadarian Price. I've been a big Jaden Grayhouse guy all season. It just hasn't happened for him for one reason or the other. So I kind of have to wait to see it before I can bring him up. But I think the screen game might be something that is worth tracking on Wednesday night. Is like, how do we create something seemingly out of nothing? Because more touches for Jeremiah Love, always a good thing.
Ryan, that's an awesome gold watch you're showing off there as well. I got to shout you out for that. But to go to your earlier question, I get the 2019 parallels because of the brands, but one, you're not playing there, which I think is huge. And I think that was maybe as, I don't know if the word contrite and Brian Kelly mix all that well, but that was as like almost apologetic as I've seen him, as far as like, wow, I really didn't have my team ready to play for that environment, which he didn't. And I thought it was inexcusable, frankly, but he kind of did fall on the sword for that one. It looked like a team that was rattled and overwhelmed by the moment and still gave itself a puncher's chance at the end to come away with the win. So that was a good Notre Dame team. I don't think it was nearly as good as this year's Notre Dame team. That was a good Georgia team. I don't think it was as good as this year's Georgia team either, but I do think not playing there on the road, first and foremost, automatically instills more confidence in the offensive line for me.
Awesome. Well, appreciate you guys taking this, and let's win one on January 1st.
All right.
Thanks, Ryan. Appreciate you.
Thanks for coming on the show. Before we sort of roll through for our next question, a big shout out to the presenting sponsor of this podcast tonight, and that's Prize Picks. You can make your holidays bigger and brighter with Prize Picks, the best place to get real money action while watching your favorite sports. You can now win up to 1,000 times your money on Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in more than 30 states, including California, Texas, Georgia, and Florida. So if you want to, bet on Joe Burrow's passing touchdowns in Week 18, you can do that. James Cook's rushing yards, you can do that. All the NFL picks, and you can find your picks to make money on Prize Picks. Download the app today and use the code SHOWUS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's download the app today and use the code SHOWUS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's Prize Picks, and at Prize Picks, you run your game. All right, we get a handful of questions here more in the show here on the Independent. Again, thanks to Prize Picks for being a presenting sponsor of this special video episode of the Sugar Bowl preview. And I guess Matt, you'll be taking this in from your couch back in Chicago. As we wait on John Scanlon.
With John is right.
Oh
now.
Man, this is like one of the great video questions of all time. This is why this app was invented. But it's going to be a cool scene down here. I'll be curious to see what it sounds like on TV, because I thought they certainly the environment at Notre Dame Stadium was awesome against Indiana, and now we're bringing in John to the show. John, you were live on the Independent with what appears to be a home field sweatshirt, which I also like a lot.
That's not also a baby, but yeah,
also the baby.
I do have two domes on domers here with me right now in class of 2046. So we're gonna try our best to get them there, but we'll see what happens. But quick question for you guys, and I'll hop off before he starts crying, which is inevitably gonna happen, is who's gonna be the leading receiver for Notre Dame if you had to bet your house on it this weekend, or on Wednesday, not this weekend?
Ooh. I
guess I'm saying Faison.
Yeah,
it's easy one for me.
If you're not giving me any odds on it, I would bet Faison. I could be convinced into like a 20-1 Jaden Harrison type of bet. because I think he's got jets and can get open deep. And he has also had some of the biggest pass plays of the season. There have not been many of them, but I think it's going to have to be a chunk play run game, but a chunk play pass game too. Like I spent a lot of time on like offensive efficiency, probably, but I just don't think this is one game where that's going to apply a whole lot. You're gonna have to create chunk plays. So Faison would be my lead pick. If you had to give me odds on it, I'd probably put some, a side bet on Jaden Harrison.
Agree with that. I'd add Jeremiah Love. I think has a sneaky chance to do it as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like kind of getting back to the previous question about like how do you create something when nothing's working in the pass game? I think the screen game to Jeremiah Love could be pretty effective. I realize Georgia also knows that, so it's not necessarily going to be this huge surprise. But I think Georgia's linebackers, for how talented they are, sometimes they're incredibly disciplined and athletic and disruptive, and sometimes they're incredibly ill-disciplined and in the wrong gap at the wrong time. And if you get Jeremiah Love the ball, the defense is in the wrong gap, I don't care if it's Miami or Georgia, he's going to run away from some people. So that's sort of where they got to go. But John, this is a very good effort hopping on the show here tonight with a sleeping baby in a home field sweatshirt.
Hey,
How,
do it
how,
again.
how old?
4 months and fellow heart patient with you, Matt. So, but doing well.
Wow.
All right. Happy to hear that last part. But you're reminding right now that was the Wrigley guy who caught the foul ball of his beer when he had the one baby in the other hand. Yeah. That's the equivalent on this podcast. But congratulations. Hope you get some sleep.
Yeah. Yeah, and then don't wake anybody up on Wednesday night, but I think it's probably a losing battle. So sorry for your 4 month old on that one. All right, thanks for coming on the show, John. We appreciate you.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. I guess Matt, it was before John's question. I was kind of the atmosphere, the environment that we're going to see on or hear on Wednesday night. Like, I feel like even though the ticket demand has been like a little bit softer than maybe you and I would have expected, I think it's going to be pretty wired, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, you've covered a game there before, right? That press box is open air and it's high, so it feels very loud.
That was like because that was the first Sugar Bowl after Hurricane Katrina, and LSU played in it. Like
Right.
that was just forget it. It was a hornet's nest. It was one of the loudest environments I've ever been in. I don't think this one will kind of hit at those levels. But in a similar way that like, look, why was the Indiana atmosphere so good? Was it the video board? Was it the music? Was it the DJ? Was it the band? No, it was like the fans were really behind the team. And I think the Notre Dame fans that show up in the Superdome on Wednesday night will be equally fired up to sort of get after it on behalf of Notre Dame. That I don't know if that will make a difference, but I think it will sound like it's making a difference as it's happening.
I would add the pregame walk on game day live with bagpipes, right as the sun had set, with game day broadcasting it, going through the game day crowd. That was like really, really, really cool. I mean, I know all pregame walks are cool, but that one in particular, where it basically interrupted the game day broadcast, it was like, that was awesome.
Yeah. All right. Well, next up on the show, we've got Nick Denig as we sort of bring him to the stage here. And Nick, I think you were live on the Independent.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it. Thank you for saying my last name right. That is a small thing that you did really well. Most people pronounce it Denning. So thank you for that. Lifelong Notre Dame fan, was born in 95. I am a Bush Push survivor at the age of 10 years old. That was my first. Yeah, really formative. Exactly. Was really predictive of what my Notre Dame football career was going to be like as a fan. So I have 2 quick questions for you, one game day question and then one big picture question. With the defensive line just being decimated with injuries, how crucial will the play of the linebackers be in this upcoming game? And then my second kind of big picture question is, I always had thought of next year as sort of like a rebuilding down year. And the more I think about it, the more I'm convinced that I actually think we're going to be really good again next year from a player development standpoint, just with so many young guys that we have returning, from Faison to Love to the O-line to the linebackers to Adon Schuler to Leonard Moore to Christian Gray. And so I'm curious, what are your guys' expectations, outlooks on the 2025 season from a young player development perspective with all the injuries that have gone on this year?
Yeah, I'll go first. Ironically enough, the linebackers are the deepest remaining part of this defense right now after what happened or what it looked like at the beginning of the season. They've been obviously very good tacklers, and it's been a lot more than just the Jack Kaiser show. So I definitely think they're going to have to be, but like everyone, got to play their A game to give Notre Dame the best chance to beat Georgia. But it's not a position of concern for me going into this one. They're just going to have to do a little bit more with that defensive line being what it is. As far as next year, I've never I didn't look at it as a bridge year so much as this year. The schedule just set up where it's like you've got to make the playoff this year. You just have to, and next year's is a lot more challenging. And as we all saw with Miami the other night, like they open at Miami next year. Miami's probably going to sign a very expensive quarterback after what happened in the second half of that bowl game because Emory Williams did not look like the answer, and he played so they could find out whether he'd be the answer or not. And that's a very tough environment to play in. You're also playing Arkansas. You're playing Texas A&M. It's a much tougher schedule. So that makes things a little bit, throws things up in the air a little bit more. And the other part of it too, I think we've all kind of assumed, CJ Carr's future. It's going to be CJ Carr next year. Pete, I got to ask you. Yeah, I mean, you just gave the reaction I thought you would give. Just seeing that press conference today and him, I don't believe him, but him saying, I don't know what my elbow injury was. While I get the gamesmanship aspect of it, that left me with some cause for concern, especially if it's like, if there's what they're saying, hey, we don't need to go to the portal. We've got our quarterbacks on the roster. If the main one has a mysterious elbow injury that snagged him for pretty much a full season now, it makes me skittish.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I feel like, the way that that's been handled or portrayed has been a bit odd to me. If Carr really is 95% and he's closing in, then like that, maybe there's not a reason for huge concern. It's just not the smooth road to the CJ Carr era that I think we would have expected at the start of the season, certainly coming out of the spring game. Nick, on your first question about the linebackers, this could be a huge Drake Bowen game, and it doesn't need to be like Drake Bowen making a lot of tackles. It has to be Drake Bowen blowing up a pulling guard, or just sacrificing his body so somebody else can go make a play. Because I do have concerns that you can get a combination block, and Georgia's gonna have a much easier time getting to the second level against the linebackers when there's no Riley Mills. That's why I get back to like, how many snaps can Gabe Rubio give you, and is 100% of the snaps too many? Because I'm not sure how much you can afford outside of that. He's realistic. You're gonna have to sub him out at some point in the game, but I think that's got to be we're gonna empty the tank on Gabe Rubio and not worry about Penn State or Boise State down the road. To your second part about next year being a bridge year, the schedule is way harder, as Matt said. I also think that allows Notre Dame to go 10-2 and be like a CFP contender in a way that going 10-2 this year would not. They have to do something in the portal at defensive tackle. They cannot go into next season with Rubio and Heinisch and then a bunch of question marks after that. So that's a concern. Pass rush, Patello is supposed to come back. Troyer will be back. Like, Burnham back. Bryce Young, I think, is going to be he's a star in the making. Linebacker should be very good even without Jack Kaiser. I mean, I was out at practice on Monday, and you're watching Madden Farimo run around. You're like, this is the most impressive physically looking linebacker that they have. Jadon Blair's out there. He would be the most impressive looking safety that they have right now. That doesn't mean that he will understand Al Golden's defense as a true freshman. I don't want to sort of go down that route, but I think they will have enough guys coming in, and we talked about this early in the show. I know Marcus Freeman doesn't want to say majors in the portal, but they've done a very, very good job at that in that part of roster building. I don't see why that would not continue. It just the reason why it wouldn't is because everyone wants defensive tackles. There's a lot of DBs available. There's a lot of wide receivers available. Notre Dame's done, I think, a very, very good job at both. But finding defensive tackles who can play at a CFP level, that is a much harder task. So it's like preseason this year. I think Matt and I both predicted 11-1. It wasn't the 11-1 that we thought.
12-0 right here.
Or 12-0. Okay, yeah. Forever the optimist, Matt Fortuna. Next year, if you asked me to like, hey Pete, what's your gut feeling? It feels, 10-2. A season where there's maybe a couple blips instead of just one. But with the schedule being set up the way it is, that 10-2 could put you in a very good position for the CFP in a way that this year's wouldn't. They would have been out if they finished 10-2. Next year, maybe they'll be in if they finish 10-2.
Awesome. Last thing I want to mention really quickly is I'm checking in from Nashville, Tennessee. So the next Shamrock series needs to be in Nashville. Please talk to your sources about making that happen.
I'm all for it. They could just rotate between Vegas and Nashville. That would be great. Just have Nashville be earlier in the year, Vegas later in the year. I'm good. I'm good with that. I like the Nashville idea a lot.
I lost
Thanks, gentlemen.
with
Appreciate
today
it.
the Music City Bowl, so I'm not really fond of Nashville today.
But hey, friend of the show, Clark Lee. We can hang out with him. He can come on a live show. Independent at that point. Nick, thanks for coming on the Independent. We appreciate you.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
All right, our producer is going to bring in a final question for our preview episode of the Independent, and then after that, Matt and I will do our picks for Wednesday night, which I know you're kind of waiting with bated breath as you listen to this podcast. But yeah, it's I mentioned this before Nick's question, but like I'm so interested to sort of see the dynamics in there in the Superdome on Wednesday night, because I think it has a chance to be like kind of one of those like elite postseason games where both fans are getting after it. And I do think there is kind of, I know mutual respect has like sort of a cliche attached to it with Notre Dame, but like I think Notre Dame and Georgia fans sort of get along pretty well. And when Georgia came up to Notre Dame in 17, yeah, when they came up to Notre Dame in 17, I think Georgia was like, oh, okay, maybe we can do this down at Georgia, and they returned the favor in 2019. So we'll see. I think it has a chance to make a pretty cool environment. As we're waiting on our last question from Charlie, you are live on the Independent. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, guys. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Where are you calling from?
I'm actually calling from LA, but English, London. So, I relatively new to college football. My wife, Notre Dame fan, so I've married into it. I'm almost scared to ask what went down in 2012 after your guys' conversation earlier.
We'll send you some YouTube links.
Pete can go do your own EPL podcast when this is done.
That one we can do. But what I wanted to ask was, how does this year's playoff team compare to Notre Dame's playoff teams of the past, sort of from 2020 and 2018?
Yeah, it's I asked Kirby Smart a version of that question, but I was asking 2017 and 2019 when they played Georgia, and he felt like they're very similar teams. And I feel that way about the way 2018 was constructed and the way 2020 was constructed. Very similar to this team that we're going to see on Wednesday night. I think, a mobile quarterback. Riley Leonard's a more dynamic runner than Ian Book. Ian Book was a superior passer. I think the wide receivers, by and large, are kind of more developmental. I do think where, the defense structured very similarly, although certainly much deeper in, this year with what we saw with Benjamin Morrison going out and Leonard Moore coming in. I think that the difference to me is in 2018 and 2020, there was no Jeremiah Love on that team. And I thought Kyron Williams was great college player. He's turning out to be a great pro player. Kyron Williams, I don't think was like a home run waiting to happen anytime he touched the ball, and the way that Jeremiah Love is. And I think that's to me the difference. And if Notre Dame wins on Wednesday night, we'll probably be talking about like how much faster and how much more team speed Notre Dame has at the running back position than they had in 2018 or 2020 or even 2012. And it's not like Notre Dame had bad players. Right now they just have an elite player in Jeremiah Love.
Yeah, I think this seems a little bit more similar to the 2020 team than the 2018 team. I thought the 2018 team played a little bit above its head, was very lucky in the health department, and that schedule ended up just being, we thought it was going to be murderers row at the beginning of the year. And frankly, it was a little bit like this year's. They had a terrible Florida State team, a terrible Virginia Tech team. USC was bad. Very, very similar in that regards. And even the Michigan team, I think they were a pretty big underdog against going into the opening of that season, and they beat them pretty handily.
A&M, right?
well.
Like the big
Yeah.
opening week win that sets the table for everything else.
No, that's fair. I just thought, I mean, this team's much deeper than the 2018 team. I do think that defense in 2020 was special. I think the receivers were better in 2020 and in 2018 as well. But this year's team is it's just so much deeper on both sides of the ball. The 2020 team, for whatever reason, I don't know if it was COVID, it was just a weird year in the world. There was something about that team where, Brian Kelly was openly talking about national championships and taking risks against Clemson and doing things that were kind of out of character for him, that just kind of spoke volumes about the level of faith he had in that team and how different that team was from everyone else. And I still think in a different year with a different playoff matchup, that team has a chance to win it all. That Alabama team that beat them is arguably the greatest college football team in my lifetime, if not of all time. And the Clemson team that beat him with Trevor Lawrence was one of the best college quarterbacks of our lifetime as well. I think if you put that 2020 team in this year's playoff field, they might be favored to win it all. So, but like Pete said, I mean, I remember it was 2019, they played down in Athens. I want to say DeAndre Swift hurdled someone, and it was like, whoa, Notre Dame's never had someone like that before. Now we see Jeremiah Love do that like multiple times a game. It's just, yeah, they've recruited to the level of athlete that can hang and beat anybody, and that's where you see the biggest difference on the field on Saturdays.
Great. Well, hoping this year's playoffs goes a lot better as well.
Yeah, maybe like in all seriousness, you can skip the 2012 YouTube videos. You don't need to watch. So.
I can tell you're new to this because you still have your hair, a lot of it.
All right, thanks for coming on the show, Charlie. We appreciate you
Thanks, guys.
joining us on the live version of The Independent. All right, Matt, as we wrap up this pregame episode of The Independent, what do you got? What happens on Wednesday night at the Superdome?
You just branded me as ever the optimist, but
I've known you as a homer here, Matt, for a long time.
I picked every single game of the playoff at the beginning of it. All four were right, of course, in the first round because, as we expected, the home teams won. But I'm not going to go back on my earlier pick. I had Georgia 24, Notre Dame 17. Notre Dame can certainly win this game. Would not shock me at all if they won this game. They go into this game with every right, thinking they can and should win this game. I think it's going to take them doing something on offense that they have not done before. And I just worry, especially without Riley Mills. I think that's just one injury too many for this unit against a Georgia team that is this capable, I would say, when they're on, whoever the quarterback is, of really taking advantage of that. So I think Georgia wins a close one, 24-17. I think, both defenses dominate for the most part. I think it comes down to the fourth quarter. I just think Georgia's been here before. Kirby Smart, in some ways, I think, has got this program right where he wants it from a narrative standpoint, and that seems to be when they're at their best. You mentioned the non-conference stat with him. End of the 2018 season, last time they lost a non-conference game. I just think I just have a hard time picking against Georgia, even though I can easily see Notre Dame winning this game.
Yeah, I'm of a similar mindset. My confidence in Notre Dame winning, even without Riley Mills, comes down to Al Golden versus Mike Bobo, and a backup quarterback. And I think that's where Georgia is really going to have a hard time moving the ball. Even in the games where they've been dominant, I don't think they've looked dominant offensively. And that was with a different quarterback in Carson Beck. And I think it's worth noting, to me at least, that the quarterback change at Georgia is not a like-for-like swap. They're going from a pass-first, pass-all-the-time quarterback to a run-first, run-all-the-time quarterback. And I know that Gunnar Stockton threw for 14,000 yards in high school at a small school level in Georgia. So he's more than capable of doing it. But I just think if you're Georgia, you have to recalibrate who you are offensively in 3 weeks or 4 weeks. And that is a very difficult thing to pull off. So I think that Notre Dame's going to severely limit Georgia offensively, which will be enough for Notre Dame to hit a few shot plays to get Jeremiah Love just enough touches. So I'm going Notre Dame 21-13. I'll go 21-17 on this one. So 3 scores each. Notre Dame ekes it out with 3 touchdowns versus Georgia, 2 touchdowns and a field goal. And that would be a hallmark win for the program. Certainly a huge win for Marcus Freeman. They've already extended his contract. I'm not sure you can do another one right away, but it would be a historic win for Notre Dame, and it wouldn't be a first historic win, but it'd be the first in a while for Notre Dame. So I'll go Notre Dame 21-17 over Georgia on Wednesday night, and then the Independent will be back at our usual post-game format for that, taking questions live for anyone who dares stay up late with us.
It's going to be a therapeutic one either way, and a late one.
Yeah.
Either way.
That's it was funny talking to my editor about like my post-game column already. I was like, whatever it is, it's going to be super easy to write. Because I think just the energy that this game will give off will be incredible. I think it will be a very fun show of the Independent to sort of make sense of it all, regardless of how it shakes out. But Matt's got Georgia. You can blame him if Notre Dame wins. I've got Notre Dame, but no one will remember that if Georgia comes out on top. So it's going to be a fun game on Wednesday night, regardless. So until Matt and I get back together post game of the Sugar Bowl, thanks for being with us on this very special episode of The Independent on Show Us. Again, thanks to Prize Pick, the presenting sponsors of this show. You can check out Prize Picks for all your fantasy needs, daily fantasy needs, and we appreciate them putting on this show here tonight. So until Wednesday, he's Matt, I'm Pete. Thanks for being with us on this episode of The Independent.